Hey, I'm Seraphine. Nice to meet you. Before I tell you my story, kindly tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I like to know where you're from. Now let's dive in. You ever have one of those moments where everything in your body is screaming, "This can't be happening"? But it is? That was me. Standing on the front porch, soaked to the skin, holding my newborn in my arms like he was the only thing tethering me to this world. And honestly, he was. Elijah was barely 3 days old. His breath was shallow, his cry weaker than it had been hours ago. I tried to hush him, even though I was shaking myself. My whole body was trembling, but I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the shock. Probably both. It was raining so hard the sky sounded like it was breaking. Thunder cracked like it was mocking me. And there I was, barefoot in a soaked nightgown, standing on a rotting wooden porch in the middle of a storm because my mama and my sister had just left us. Left. Like we were trash. They slammed the door behind them so hard I felt it in my chest. I ran after them, begging, but they didn't even look back. The tires spun mud as they peeled out of the driveway, tail lights disappearing into the rain like it was nothing. And then it was just us. Me and my baby. Banged on the door. Screamed. Cried. I could still hear Mama's voice ringing in my head, telling me how I'd ruined everything. How having this baby was selfish. How I was bringing shame on the family. How Raven had plans that didn't include being stuck in this godforsaken town while I played mother. But here's the part that really broke me. Raven looked me dead in the face, smiled and said, "Good luck, Mama. Let's see how long you last." And then she was gone. I sat down right there on the porch, legs folded, rain dripping off the ends of my hair. I curled Elijah against my chest and whispered his name again and again like it was a prayer. Like maybe if I said it enough, God would take pity and send someone. Anyone. But no one came. Not that night. Not the next morning either. You ever go hungry while nursing a baby? You ever try to sing lullabies when your lips are too cracked to move? I scavenged. Dug through garbage cans. Took old canned soup from a broken-down camper 2 blocks over. I boiled water on a rusted hot plate from the storage shed out back. I used my last $20 on formula, then cried in the Dollar General bathroom when I realized I had no diapers and no idea how to ask for help. I was 17. And the only thing keeping me upright was that tiny little heartbeat pressed against my chest. It wasn't just the physical pain. It was the silence, the isolation, the sheer weight of being unwanted. Had no phone, no friends. I hadn't been to school in months. My entire world had narrowed down to Elijah's next feeding and surviving the night without freezing or breaking down completely. And yet, I was still here. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning. Not the beginning of the end, though God knows it felt like it. Whoa. That night, that storm. That silence. It was the beginning of my becoming. The worst part. A piece of me still hoped they'd come back. Isn't that crazy? After everything they did, the yelling, the manipulation, the threats, I still watched the road for headlights. I still imagined my mama walking up those porch steps, crying, saying she was sorry. That she'd hold Elijah and call him her grandbaby. But they never did. And after a while, I stopped hoping. Because hoping felt more painful than letting go. So I made a promise to Elijah that night. Right there on that porch, still damp from the storm. I whispered in his ear, "You're never gonna feel the kind of hurt I did. Not from me. Not ever." And I meant it. Even if I had to fight the whole damn world to keep that promise, I would. Because I was done begging to be loved. It was time to survive. Chapter 2. The Man with the Kind Eyes. I didn't sleep much after that night. The storm passed, but the cold settled in like it had unpacked a suitcase. The old camper I'd been squatting in creaked with every gust of wind, and Elijah's cries echoed off the metal walls like thunder still hadn't let us go. I kept thinking, this can't be how our story starts. But it was. There was no soft beginning. No warm hospital room or family waiting with balloons. Just rain, hunger, and my arms wrapped around the only good thing that had ever come from all the bad. And then, out of nowhere, life cracked open a little. Started with a knock. Not on the camper door, God no, that thing barely had hinges, but on the side panel, near the window I'd stuffed with cardboard. I thought maybe it was the cops. Or worse, Raven. I didn't answer at first. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath, praying Elijah wouldn't cry. The knock came again, lighter this time. Then a voice. Hey. I'm not here to bother you. Just saw you going a few days ago. Wanted to check in. You okay in there? Froze. I hadn't seen anyone watching. I'd been careful. Thought. I peeked out through a crack in the cardboard. There he was. A man. Probably in his late 20s, early 30s. Brown skin, shaved head, a scruffy beard. Worn flannel shirt and jeans like he worked with his hands. He wasn't holding a clipboard or a badge. Just a paper bag. And coffee. He caught my eyes through the gap. I brought food, he said. And diapers. Got the wrong size maybe, but figured it's better than nothing. Now don't get me wrong. Every red flag in my brain was waving like it was a parade. I didn't trust anyone, especially men. But something about the way he stood there, no pressure, no pity, made me crack the door just a little. He smiled. Not one of those creepy, slick smiles. Soft one. The kind people give babies in grocery stores or dogs they're not afraid of. I'm Marlon, he said. I work over at Parker's Auto. I saw you walking from town with the baby the other day. Looked like you could use a hand. I wanted to slam the door shut. I wanted to scream, mind your business. But then Elijah whimpered behind me, and the smell from the bag hit me. Biscuits. And something sweet. Maybe jelly? My knees buckled a little, so I opened the door wider. We didn't talk much at first. I let him hand me the bag, and I nodded. That was it. But he didn't push. Just gave a small wave and backed off. Leave that outside if it's weird, he said, motioning to the food. I just didn't feel right doing nothing. Then he left. Just like that. No strings. No weird questions. No, you should smile more. Just a man with kind eyes and breakfast. I didn't eat it right away. I stared at the bag for 10 minutes straight, wondering if it was a trick. Then Elijah fussed again and I caved. I gave him what formula I had left, then ate half the biscuit like it might vanish. And you know what? Tasted like hope. Not big dramatic hope. Just the kind that says, maybe I don't have to do this completely alone. He came back the next day. Knocked again. Left another bag. This time it had wipes. A small can of formula. Sandwich. Still didn't push. Still didn't ask questions. Day after that, he came with a space heater and an extension cord. You don't gotta talk, he said through the crack in the door. I just figure we all get lost sometimes. Doesn't mean we stay there. And man, that did something to me. Hit a nerve I didn't know was still raw. 'Cause I was lost. But maybe I didn't have to stay lost forever. I let him sit inside that third night. Just for a few minutes. Just while Elijah slept. We didn't say much. Just passed the time. Told him my name. Told him Elijah's. Didn't get into the backstory yet. Not then. Just enough to make it real. He told me about his sister in New York, how they barely talk now. Said he used to be a real mess back in the day. Trouble with the law. Temper. A lot of pain. But I got tired of hating the world, he said. So I picked something else. I looked at him. What did you pick? He smiled, sad and warm at the same time. Fixing things. That night, after he left, I looked around the camper. It was still broken. Still cold. Still small. But for the first time it didn't feel like a prison. Felt like a beginning. I wish I could say that everything started getting better after Marlon came around. That suddenly the sky cleared, birds sang, and Elijah and I had warm beds and clean bottles and a future. But healing don't happen all at once. Especially not when you're still living in the aftermath. And my aftermath was a graveyard of silence, shame, and the stuff they left behind. Marlon had only been gone an hour that night, and I was sitting there. Just me and Elijah again. Staring at the cracked walls of that camper like they might start talking back. That space heater he brought hummed low in the corner, barely making a dent in the chill. But still, it was the warmest it had ever been since I'd moved in. I looked down at my son. His cheeks finally had some color again. He was fed, clean, wrapped in a blanket that didn't smell like mildew. And I should have felt safe. But instead I started shaking. Because that's what happens when things start to feel almost okay. Your body remembers how bad it's been. And suddenly, the calm feels scarier than the chaos. I couldn't stop thinking about them. Raven. I hated myself for still thinking about them, but it was like trying to look away from a car crash you were in. You don't just forget that kind of betrayal. You carry it, like rust under your skin. I needed to see it again. Needed to know if maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined it all. That stormy night. The door slamming. The tail lights disappearing. So I wrapped Elijah up in 3 layers, zipped my hoodie over both of us, and walked the half-mile back to the house I used to call home. It looked different. Not physically. It still had the chipped paint, the overgrown yard, the busted swing hanging lopsided from the oak tree. But it felt emptier. Like whatever ghost of family I'd imagined still lived there had moved out with them. The front door was wide open. I stepped up to the porch real slow, my heart thudding in my ears. Elijah squirmed against me like he could feel my pulse. The living room was trashed. Furniture turned over. Drawers yanked out. Cabinets emptied like someone had tried to erase themselves from the place in a hurry. And then I saw it. On the wall, scrawled in bright red spray paint above the mantel. You made your choice. 4 words. 4 goddamn words that hit me harder than all the screaming matches combined. I backed away like the letters were on fire. I almost didn't notice the shoebox by the stairs. Almost walked right past it. But something made me stop. Inside was everything they didn't want, but couldn't quite burn. An old photo of me from 10th grade, in my band uniform. A pair of Elijah's socks that Raven had thrown across the nursery the night we fought. My journal, pages ripped but still there. And a note. Just a scrap of paper, folded and shoved under everything like they'd wanted to hide it even from themselves. It was in Mama's handwriting. You've got your mother's stubbornness and your father's recklessness. That baby will destroy you just like he destroyed me. I pray you come to your senses before it's too late. I stared at it, the paper trembling in my hands. It wasn't just the words, it was the fact that she believed them. That she really thought she was saving me by leaving me with nothing. I stuffed the whole box under my arm and walked out without looking back. That night, back in the camper, I stayed up while Elijah slept. I lit one of those cheap prayer candles I'd found in a dollar bin weeks ago. Not because I believed in miracles or saints, but because I needed to see something burn that wasn't me. I held the note over the flame for a second, just long enough to watch the edges curl and turn black, and then I let it go. I wasn't burning it to forget. I was burning it to remember who I was, not who she said I'd be. Marlon came by the next morning with groceries and didn't ask why my eyes were puffy or why the camper smelled like smoke. He just handed me a can of peaches, smiled and said, "They had 2 for 1. And in that moment I felt it. The beginning of something different. Not perfect, not painless, but real. A new kind of family. The kind you get to choose. There's a kind of knock that doesn't sound like it belongs to a neighbor or a stranger passing through. It's firmer, sharper. Like whoever's behind the door isn't just visiting. They came with authority. And bad news. That's the kind of knock I heard 3 days after I burned Mama's letter. And the moment it hit the camper's dented door, every cell in my body screamed, "Hide him." I scooped Elijah up so fast he barely had time to whimper. I wrapped him in the thickest blanket I had and tucked him behind the partition curtain I'd hung across the back corner. It wasn't much, but it was the best I could do. The knock came again. Seraphine Tate. A woman's voice called out, clipped and professional. "Child Protective Services. We just want to talk." I didn't answer. Maybe if I stayed silent she'd go away. Maybe if I didn't breathe, time would freeze and I could figure out what the hell to do. But silence doesn't work on people like that. People from the system don't scare easy, especially when they've got paperwork and a badge to wave around. I'm not here to take your child, she said like she could read my mind. But I do need to see him. I have a report. Report. That word landed like a fist. There were only 3 people alive who knew where I was. And one of them sure as hell had a motive. I cracked the door an inch. Enough to see her. Mid-40s, salt and pepper hair pulled into a tight bun, clipboard in hand, the look of someone who's seen too many bad endings to believe in good ones. She softened when she saw me. Ms. Tate, she said, we received an anonymous call expressing concern for your child's safety. They said you were living in abandoned property with no utilities. That you were unstable. Unstable. I could almost hear Raven's voice behind that word, like she'd dictated it herself. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, arms crossed, blocking the doorway with my body. I just need to make sure the baby's okay, she said. No one's in trouble. But that was a lie. Because when you're poor, alone, and young, you're always in trouble. Even if you're doing your damn best. Especially then. I could have slammed the door. But Elijah stirred from behind the curtain and let out a soft cry, and that was it. I knew there was no hiding this. So I stepped aside. The worker walked in slow, eyes scanning everything. The space heater in the corner. The clean bottles drying on a towel. The makeshift crib I'd built from a storage bin and blankets. The grocery bags Marlon had left that morning still sitting on the counter. Then she saw Elijah. She approached him like he was fragile glass, and for a second I wanted to snatch him up, hold him so tight the world couldn't touch him. But I didn't. Because if I showed even a hint of fear, I knew she'd write it down. She crouched next to him and smiled. Hi there, little man, she said softly. You look warm. And clean. She looked at me. He's fed. Always, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She didn't flinch. Just nodded and scribbled something. Is there anyone helping you? She asked, her tone measured. Family. I barked out a laugh before I could stop it. She looked up. I mean no, I said. There's no one. Not anymore. What about the child's father? Gone before he was born. He paused again. You have any friends? Neighbors checking in. He hesitated. There's someone. Not family. But he helps. Is he staying here? No. He just brings food. Things we need. I could feel her judgment balancing on a tightrope, trying to decide which way to fall. After what felt like an hour, she stood. Well, she said, I can't lie and say this is ideal. But he's not in immediate danger. You're clearly trying. And that counts. I didn't know if she meant it or if it was the kind of line they feed people like me right before they come back with the cops. She tucked her clipboard under her arm. I'll have to follow up. This is still an open report. But I'm not removing your son today. That word today made my knees weak. She handed me a card. If you get somewhere more stable, safer, call me. It'll help. I nodded even though I had no idea how to do that. When she left, I didn't move for a while. Just sat next to Elijah, rocking him slowly, my hand shaking as I brushed his cheek. He was still mine. For now. But the walls were closing in. That night, when Marlon came by, I didn't even say hello. I just opened the door and fell into his chest. CPS came, I whispered. He didn't say anything for a second. Just wrapped his arms around me like he knew what that meant without needing details. They're trying to take him from me, I said, my voice breaking. No, Marlon said, firm. They won't. Not if I can help it. And the way he said it, I believed him. Even if I didn't believe much else yet. I believed that. I didn't sleep that night. Even with Elijah curled against me. His little breaths soft and steady, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every creak of the camper felt like a car pulling up. Every gust of wind sounded like another knock at the door. I kept hearing that woman's voice in my head. I'm not removing your son today. Not today. Not yet. Not if you stay quiet, stay hidden, stay barely getting by. Marlon stayed longer than usual that night. Sat with me on the floor after Elijah went back to sleep. His long legs stretched out, sipping canned tea like we weren't sitting in a falling-apart camper trying to keep the government off my back. "I know a place," he said after a long stretch of silence. I looked up wary. "A place? Yeah, like, more stable. It ain't the Ritz, but it's not this either. My cousin's girl Gina. She rents out rooms to single moms sometimes. Is cool. Real no-nonsense, but she don't judge." I shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around my legs. And she just let me and Elijah move in. Just like that. I shrug. She's got a soft spot for fighters. And for babies. Especially babies who didn't ask for none of this. I stared at him, eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" He blinked like I'd caught him off guard. "Doing what?" "This. Bringing food. Looking out for us. Trying to move us into some lady's house. What do you want from me?" Marlon didn't flinch. Didn't even blink hard. He just leaned forward and said quietly, "Not everything comes with strings, Seraphine. Some people just know what it's like to be left in the dirt. And they don't want anyone else staying there." The words hit something deep. 'Cause that's exactly what it felt like. Like my family had dug a ditch, shoved me and my baby in, and walked away, expecting us to disappear. But we hadn't. We were still here. Barely. But here. The next morning I packed the few things I had into 2 grocery bags. Elijah's formula. The tiny stack of clothes Marlon had brought. My tattered journal. And the shoebox of what Raven and Mama had left behind. Even the ashes of the note I'd burned. I almost left it. But no. I needed the reminder. Not of their cruelty, but of how far I'd come since that night on the porch. Marlon pulled up in an old pickup truck that looked held together by willpower and duct tape. I hesitated at the camper door, holding Elijah tight to my chest. "Last chance to back out," he said, resting his arm on the open window. Smirk. "I don't back out. I fight." And with that, I stepped out of the camper and into something that felt dangerously close to hope. Gina's place was in the next town over. Old 2-story house with peeling white paint and flowers growing wild along the fence like they didn't care about rules. She opened the door before we even got out of the truck. Short woman. Thick braids pulled back into a scarf. No smile, no nonsense, just a nod. "You're Seraphine." "Yes, ma'am." "Got the baby?" I turned so she could see Elijah's tiny face peeking out from the blanket. Gina nodded again. "Come on. I got a room upstairs. Don't trash it. Don't bring drama. You handle your business and we won't have problems. Deal?" He nodded. "Deal." The room was small but it had heat. Crib. Real mattress. Curtains that closed. A dresser with one drawer that stuck, but still worked. It might as well have been a castle. I laid Elijah down in the crib and stood there staring at him for a long time. He kicked one foot out of the blanket, like he knew something had shifted. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered something I hadn't said since he was born. "We're gonna be okay." And this time I almost believed it. But good things don't come without echoes. And late that night, after Gina went to bed and the house settled into quiet, I got a text. An unknown number. "You think moving changes anything? We're still watching. He doesn't belong with you." My hands went ice cold. They'd found me. Again. Raven. Maybe even Mama. And they weren't done. Not even close. Thanks for watching. And stay tuned to AJ Family Drama. I will continue the story in part 2.